now my great pleasure to introduce the man we all love so much, Dr. Leo Buscaglia.
Told you we have a crowd.
Mama and Papa, you see what you did? And you know that I can't talk with all of this paraphernalia. So again, you'll excuse me. And notice, isn't that incredible? I'm really improving on getting up in the world. I used to have to throw it on the floor, but now I have a place to hang it. I don't know why we wear these second tongues. Yeah. You know that I have a lot of fun talking about my wonderful Italian name, Felice Leonardo Buscaglia, and I'm so proud of it. And every time I get together with an audience, I want to share the new stories that I collect about this wonderful name, because they happen to me every single day. And you know that Buscaglia has always been, if I don't really understand why, but it's always been a problem with everybody. And so it's pronounced Buscaglia, Buscalgia, Buscaglia, Buscalooza, even spaghetti. I mean, that's the truth. And it doesn't matter to me as long as you call me something, and I've enjoyed all of the mispronunciations along with the pronunciations. And lately it's been wonderful, because every time I appear on Good Morning America or Good Night LA or See You Tomorrow, the person now says Buscaglia. It sounds so wonderful. So at long last we're teaching them about pronunciation. But I've always hesitated using my first name, and those of you who know me know that my first name is Felice. And that's also lovely, but it also presents problems. And I've called the foundation the Felice Foundation, because it means peace and joy and happiness in Italian. You know that. Mama knew it. That's why she called me that. And anyway, I am afraid to use Felice, because some of you know that I was called Phyllis. And I always hesitate, you know, it's nothing wrong with the name Phyllis. It's just sort of odd when you're in a large group and someone says, would Phyllis come up and get, you know, and I walk up. So that happened to me, and somebody poked their neighbor and said, his name is Phyllis. Don't you love it? But you know, Leo has never been a problem. It comes from my middle name, which is Leonardo. And it's never caused me a problem, ever, until recently. And you know, I keep hearing, as many of us do, the words of Mama all the time, that she was such an intelligent lady. And she used to say, be humble, that the minute you get too big for your pants, they split and expose you for what you are. And it's the truth, you know. I remember hearing a story about the wonderful Italian tenor Enrico Caruso, and he was traveling in Connecticut somewhere, and he had a flat tire, and he drove into a gas station, and he asked the attendant if he would fix the flat tire. And the attendant said, sure. And he said, I'm in a great, great hurry. And you know, Caruso didn't have a modest ego. It was as big as his body, you know, it was huge. And he said, I'm in a big hurry, and I'd appreciate it if you'd work on it right away. And he said, you know, I'm the great Caruso. And this mechanic looked at him and he said, oh, you're that man that my wife likes so much. And he said, look, I'll work double fast if you don't mind if I just run over to the house and bring her out so she can meet you, because she'd really be disappointed if she didn't meet you. Well, you know, Caruso was really, his ego was even more this man's wife. He said, sure. This guy runs over and he shouts through the screen door. He says, honey, come out. I want you to meet that great explorer, Robinson Crusoe. I have a better one than that, you won't believe it. You know, I was recently in New York. I was there with my publisher and his wife, and a friend of mine, and we were walking down the Avenue of the Americas. And you know, some people go to New York City and they get mugged. I go to New York City and I get hugged. It's fantastic. Things are looking up. So I'm walking down the street, the Avenue of the Americas, and people are coming up saying, Felice, how are you? You know, and taxi drivers are stopping, and it's the most incredible experience. And of course, my ego is really getting big. I forget all about Mama. You know, she's on up here somewhere saying, watch it. But I'm getting bigger and bigger. And we're on our way to breakfast. And every time I go to New York City, I love the delicatessens. And my favorite breakfast when I'm in New York City is lox, eggs, and onions. You know, Nova Scotia salmon mixed with eggs and onions. And oh, it's just my idea of paradise. And so we're on our way there, and we get to this delicatessen, and we go inside, and my publisher orders a bagel, you know, a well-toasted bagel, and his wife orders some cornmeal or something. And I order lox, eggs, and onions. And there's this waitress who's so typical of New York City, you know, the kind of a waitress that it wouldn't shake her if there was a baboon there, ordering 4 eggs up easy. You know, she'd deliver them. What does she care? And so she comes up, she says, what'll you have? You know, with her little pad ready. And she takes it all down, and when she gets to me, you know, I order lox, eggs, and onions, and I just can't wait for it to come. Pretty soon she comes, very efficient lady. She comes and she says, your bagel, you know, and your cornmeal, and she says, and here's Leo. And I thought, wow, I looked at her, I said, you know my name. She looked at me, she said, honey, I don't know you from Adam. I said, but you said Leo. She says, that's just short for lox, eggs, and onions. Mama's always right, you know. Anyway, tonight I'd like to talk to you about something that means so much to me, as all of you know, and that is giving your love away. I really don't know why we're hoarding it. Look at the amount of love in this audience. If you all were dedicated to giving it away, we could change the face of the earth. I'm sure of it. There's no question about it. Such powerful energy is yours. And you know, but love is just a wonderful idea until it's acted upon, until it's actually something that happens between you and me. Otherwise, it's just some nebulous force that has no power. There's a wonderful story about a young man that went to study with a great teacher. And he asked this great teacher, he said, I would like to know the difference between heaven and hell. And the great teacher said, well, this is very easy. He said, hell is a place where there is an enormous banquet with all the most exquisite things to eat. But all the people there are starving to death and miserable. Because you see, they have to use 4-foot-long forks to get the food to their mouth. And they're all starving to death. And this young man said, good grief, well, tell us about heaven. And he said, well, heaven is the same thing. It's an enormous banquet table with every kind of conceivable food you could dream of. And there, too, they have to eat with 4-foot forks. But everyone is delighted and well-fed and happy and joyous because, you see, they use their forks to feed each other. And therein lies the difference. There's no question about it. There's so many ways, simple little ways of giving your love away. You know, things like little human affirmations that you may not even think about, little thoughtful acts and common courtesies. You know, one of the most incredible stories I ever heard was a young lady. Some of you may have seen a show that I did many years ago called Love Class. And in it, there's a beautiful young girl who is in a wheelchair, and she has cerebral palsy, quadriplegic, all of her limbs are involved. But she has this incredible, stunning mind. In fact, she is presently working at USC on her doctorate in her final year. And when she was in high school, you know, no one sort of paid her much attention. She was brilliant, she was intelligent, but no one ever really called attention to her or affirmed her being in a real positive sense. And one day, just after preparation for graduation, one of her teachers just sort of offhandedly said, Maria, what university are you going to? And she said, university? It had never occurred to her that she could go to a university. And she thought about it and she said, you know, if he thinks I can, maybe I can. And she went home that night and she said, Mama, I'm going to university. Her mother said, Maria, you must be crazy. How can you go to a university? You can't even walk. You can't barely move. You can't go to a university. You'd have to be able to drive. She said, then I'm going to learn how to drive. She drives. Now, you haven't lived until you've driven with Maria, I tell you. She's always offering me rides to the airport. No way. But she gets there, you know. She goes to work in the morning. She works all day. She comes back to the university. She takes her classes. She drives home, all on her own. She says it's wonderful to drive along, you know, the way she's doing, and as she's ataxic, and she holds very hard to the wheel, and she's standing there like this, you know, and people they pull up alongside her, and they look inside, and they do a double take, and she says, you know, she has a blast driving back and forth. But somebody saw her, and it made a difference. And you have that power to see people. And you know what kills me is that we walk down the street and we don't see each other. We don't look at each other. We don't even look at the people we love. I know I've mentioned before, but I mention again that, you know, we oftentimes, I used to ask my students in love class, what was the color of their mother's eyes? And you know, they couldn't even tell me. You know, grab them, look at them. One of these days, you're going to try desperately to conjure them up, and they're not going to be there. Look at each other. Affirm someone's being. And you do that simply by saying hello. You know, I do it this way. Scares everybody to death. You know, this is Leo Buscaglia. Hi! Ugh. It's like I'm going to kill you. But I'll tell you, you become affirmed when somebody reaches out and gives you a good, firm hug. You know that you are, and you're not invisible. Little thoughtful acts. You know, one of the most beautiful moments of my life was what happened several years ago. Several of you know that I had a coronary bypass. In fact, I had a quintuple bypass. I didn't even know at the time that there were 5 ways of getting in and out of the heart. I understand that's about it. You know, when Buscaglia does it, he does it all the way. And so I was in the hospital, and the doctor had told me that it was a very severe condition. I'd had complications, and he was an honest man and a friend, and he said, I don't know whether you'll come out of this. It was a very interesting moment in my life. All of us talk about death and our ability to meet death when it comes, but then when it comes face to face, and it's standing by your bedside, and you feel its warm breath, that is the moment of truth, you know. And so I was lying there, and all at once, my publisher walked in. He'd flown in from New York City, and he came to my bedside, and I said, Charles, what are you doing here? And he said very simply, I've come to be with you. It was an amazing feeling for me that this man had flown in from New York City to Los Angeles, and he said, I'm going to be here when you come out of this, and I'm going to be here as you get well, and then when you're well, I'll leave. You know, that had something to do, I'm sure, with giving me a real positive attitude when I got in there. I was going to live, even if it was just for Charles. And you know, little thoughtful acts. I don't know what gets into us that we feel because we're married to someone or they're part of our family that we have any license to be rude to them. And you hear people talking to each other really cruelly. Pass the dish! You know, it's the truth. Sometimes we forget. And isn't it funny? We never think of saying something like that to a friend. Come here! You jerk! It's a good thing we're forgiving. But you know, my papa used to always say, and I love it, and it keeps ringing in my ears, he says, it costs nothing to be nice. Isn't that a wonderful thing? It costs nothing. It doesn't. It costs you nothing to be nice. And it pays back dividends like of which you can't even dream of. You know, a recent Gallup poll said that 55% of Americans spend some of their time volunteering, doing things for others. And you know, that made me so pleased and proud. And then I mentioned this to a cynic at the university who said to me, Buscaglia, you really are naive. You know, people lie on Gallipolls. He said, do you think when someone from Gallup comes up to you and says, are you doing something nice for somebody else, you'd say, no, I'm not? He said, of course everyone's going to say they're doing something nice for somebody else. Well, you know, I like to believe that that man is wrong. I like to believe that we really are doing beautiful things for people. And I think it's time we start celebrating those people that are doing beautiful things for people. Because we spend 99% of our time on the media and the newspaper celebrating monsters, while the good people are doing these wonderful things and nobody celebrates them. I remember being so pleased when I read about a boy in Philadelphia who was a very young kid, about 13 or 14, who was walking down the street and saw people freezing in doorways and thought there was something wrong with this, and went home and stripped all the blankets off his bed and went back and gave it to these people. You know, his parents came home. What have you done? What could they say? They should have been really proud. And then he went home back to school and he said to the students at school, you know, you're all getting ready for proms and worrying about dresses and coats and jackets and formals. What about these people who are freezing? Go home and strip your beds. Boy, there was a real run on wonderful warm blankets in Philadelphia, you know. But I love to hear stories like that. A businessman I've heard of who works all day long and then in the evening teaches computer classes free of charge to people so that he can help place them in positions. All of us have the power to do that. I heard one of the most delightful stories, a woman who had just raised her family and finally got everybody into universities or colleges or whatever they were going to do, and then finally looked around and she remembered, she didn't forget, what it was like to be a mama with little infants. And the fact that for 24 hours a day she was with these kids. You know, that's an amazing feat. We tend to take it for granted, but being with a screaming kid, having another one on a leash, and one on your back is no mean feat. I'm convinced that no man could handle it. And so she decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go around the neighborhood and find women who have newborn kids, and I'm going to relieve them for some time during the day. She went to doors and she knocked and she said, look, I can take care of your kid. I'm a mom of 7. I know what to do. You go away. Go to a movie during the week. You know, isn't that great? Go to a restaurant. Buy yourself a meal. Go to the library. Read a magazine. Sit under a tree. Now that seems like a little thing, but it isn't. To those mamas, it was an incredible thing in her neighborhood. I always feel that there should be a park in every city for mamas. Nobody gets to go in there except mamas. And they go in, you know, and they scream. And, ah! And then they go home and say, what did you say, honey? Sure, it's all right to puke on the rug. I was recently in southern Illinois, and I really didn't even know that such things still went on, but I walked into a senior citizen center, and there were these wonderful women, about 13 of them, sitting there quilting. This beautiful quilt. You know, and I said, that is absolutely gorgeous. You know, what are you going to do with it? Well, when we're all done, we're going to sell it, and then the money is going to go for Meals on Wheels. And I said, oh, you're all so wonderful. And they looked at me like I was something from outer space. And they said, we have the fun. What are you talking about? This is our time to gossip and to talk and to relate. You know, you used to do it years ago. I remember in Mama's early days, she used to talk about going down to the stream and washing the clothes on a rock with all the other women. And when they found that they could have, you know, pots to put these in, they objected to them. How will we talk to each other? Where will we socialize? Something to think about. And recently I got a letter, I was talking about this, and 2 elderly ladies wrote me the most wonderful letter and said, we decided that there was much more we could do than what we were doing. And we decided we wanted a kind of a hands-on doing. And so we were driving down the road and we saw a man with a flat tire. And one of them said, Gertrude, let's stop and help him out. So these two ladies pulled off the road, you know, and they came hobbling up there, and they said, "Honey, can we help you?" You know, this man freaked. And he said to them, "Oh, no, that's really nice of you, but I can take care of my tire." And they said, "Well, at least we can stand here and give you some moral support." And so they both stood there on the roadside, and they said, you know, they sang "Rock of Ages" while he was changing his tire. And I thought, you know, I'm sure that man will never forget that experience. Talk about giving and gentleness and kindness. In Los Angeles, we have a phantom flower giver, someone that goes to different neighborhoods early in the morning and puts little flowers on everybody's windshield with a little note around it saying, "Spread beauty today." You know, I'm sure there are people that take those flowers and say, "What a jerk," and throw them away. But there are some people that wake up to the possibility that maybe they do have the power to spread some beauty, because it's certainly theirs. I also heard of a woman that goes into a park where they're in a poverty area, and she takes quarters and she sort of scatters them around for little kids to find, near the swings, near the slides. Remember, and it isn't too far back, when you were a little kid and you found a quarter? The world changed for you. It was such a little thing, such happiness. You know, how shall I spend it? 2 jawbreakers. 1 Abba Zaba. Remember Abba Zaba? I wonder whatever happened to Abba Zaba. It dates me, but I used to love Abba Zabas. Tootsie Rolls. You can make a kid's day. But in reality, you know, what we do is a kind of a language. It tells the world and ourselves who we are, how we see ourselves, and what we think is or isn't important. And you know, we have a tradition of giving. Barn raisings and bucket brigades and wakes and births where we all came together and celebrated. And I'd like to see those things revived again. Because when you give, life takes on a very special meaning. You know, I always ask my students, and they hated this assignment, what is your purpose for being? Have you ever thought about that? What are you here for? Is it to take up space, to cause traffic jams? I don't think so. The very fact that everybody in this audience, and if there are 7,000, I understand there are perhaps more, is unique in all the world. And I know I keep saying this, but it's almost as if we refuse to listen to it. There are no 2 people in this audience that are the same. You have different talents, you have different perceptions, you have different feelings, you have different histories. That must tell you that each of you has something unique to do on the face of this earth. What is it? Have you decided? Because I think happiness comes on the day that you decide what that is. You develop it, and then you share it with others. And I would ask my students, what is your purpose for being? And of course, they wanted to make Dr. Biscaglia happy, and they knew all the answers. My purpose for being is to help others. You know, and I say, what are you doing to help others? Oh, I'm a horrible shouting teacher. My purpose for being is to be happy. Good, and after you're happy, what? I don't know. My purpose for being, oh, and this is very popular nowadays. My purpose for being is to get all I can from life. And then I say, and after you have it all, then what? I don't know. You know, the amazing part is that it always seems to stop with them, where that's really only just the beginning. I really believe that loneliness, devastation, and happiness comes from the fact that we flounder without purpose. We don't believe that we have something that we can share to make the world a more beautiful place to be in. You know, Carl Menninger, the wonderful psychiatrist, said happiness is finding a mission in life and taking it seriously. And you know, there's an old Chinese proverb that I love. It's rather cynical, but it really is amazing when you think about it. It says this: if you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. Isn't that great? If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. And this is a little cynical, but it's a very interesting to think about. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. And this is really very profound. If you want to be happy for a year, inherit a fortune. You soon find out that isn't what it's cracked up to be. But if you want to be happy for life, says the Chinese proverb, help others. Helen Colton, who's done some fabulous scientific research in the area of giving, says this is the crux of our Melis. Few of us have a mission to make us feel that our lives have a purpose, that someone out there, perhaps lots of someone's, cares that we exist. You know how you can measure that? What's the response of people when you walk into a room? Is it, oh, look who's here! Oh, how wonderful! Or is it, oh my God, honey, run for cover? She continues, as more people rebel against the dehumanization and mechanization of living in our society, a major way, perhaps even the major way in which we will achieve a higher quality of life, and I love this, which means having more good feelings about ourselves. That's essential for survival. Liking you. It always used to amaze me when I'd say to people in love class, for instance, if you could be anybody in the world that you could be, whom would you select to be? And it would always be somebody else. What a wonderful thing when you can get to the point where you'd say, me, honey. I want to be me. And you know, you might as well be, because that's all you're ever going to be. You know, sometimes people hug me and they say, oh, Leo, you know, never, never, never be anything else but you. And I say, you can count on that. I've tried so long trying to be someone else and it doesn't work. Avoiding the terrible pain of boredom, we may well find ourselves deriving from what we do for others. We have peak feelings of well-being when we've done something for others and we like ourselves for it, and there's no question about it. You know, we're finding that people live longer who have something to nurture. A plant, a tree, a garden that you feel responsible for, even a pet. They're finding that if they can bring in sick rooms and in homes for the aging, something, flower pots or something for people to take care of, they live longer. It's something to get up in the morning for. And if you can get up in the morning for a pot and a flower and a dog, you could certainly have people to celebrate when you get up. Helen Colton suggests that we have missions in life. She says, maybe we could find ways of having periodic vacations for people living in poverty that never have them. She has a wonderful idea that I would love to see put to work, putting elderly people in college dorms instead of retirement homes. Oh, that would be so beneficial to both. The kids would learn about life, the wonderful story that is going down the drain because nobody wants to listen to the stories of people who are aging. And they have fabulous stories to tell. We should all tell our story. Do you know there will be kids that one day will look back and they will know nothing about mama and nothing about papa because they've never taken a minute to find out about it, nor have mamas and papas insisted that they listen. I've talked about it before, but I think it's wonderful, and you don't really have to buy it. You can make your own. But there's a little book called Mama is Quite a Girl and Papa is Quite a Man. And it's a book that you fill out, and then you leave it to your children instead of your bank account, or along with it if you want to. And it answers questions like, who was the first boy that ever kissed you? Mama. You know, there are kids that think their mothers never kissed anybody. You know, like I've said before, they think they're the fruit of the Immaculate Conception. Mama kicked her heels up. Find out about the time she kicked her shoes off. What was your happiest moment in life? What was your most devastating moment? Tell your kids, one of these days, it's going to be far more precious than the money you've left them. Thank goodness that I know my history. You know, Mama had a way of telling us. And we loved to listen to the story again and again and again. It was never, you know. And then I got on the train to come to Los Angeles, and I had Vincenzo in my arms, and he was sick. And he was crying all the time, and I was embarrassed, and I couldn't speak English, and I didn't know how to get the milk. You know, we'd sit there and cry, oh, poor Mama. But, you know, in those situations, Mama will never die. I think that the only thing that's immortal about us is the love that we've left, the history that maybe will never be written, but will be passed on. And we talk a lot about love, but you know, we don't see too much of it expressed. I still get letters from great lovers who say, I love my wife more than anyone in the world, but if she ever fools around with anybody, I'll kill her. Now there's the kind of love you're looking for. And one of the best loving stories I ever read, and I'm sure she did this with tongue in cheek, was a woman who really her only joy in life, the way she described it, was her little dog. And she said, you know, my little dog does things my husband would never do. I walk into a room and he wags his tail. My husband has never done that. I put him on my lap and occasionally he licks me. You know, my husband would never do that. She loved this dog. He said to her, you get rid of the dog or you get rid of me. And so, having a wonderful sense of humor, this lovely lady put in a want ad in the newspaper. And this is the way it read, and she sent me a copy of it, and we in the office laughed for 7 days. She says, my husband says, either he goes or the dog goes. The dog is adorable, slim, loving, and pedigreed. My husband is rude, fat, and a mixed breed. Take your pick. You know, I never used to let a kid get out of my classes, any of my classes, without asking them to do something for somebody else. And actually, I think in the long run, that was the most precious thing I could have given them. I remember once we decided that we were going to assume it as a project, go as a class, and work at Spastic Children's Foundation in Los Angeles. And there was one little girl that had really been protected from life. And what a pity to protect our children from life. We think we're doing them a favor. And then when they grow up, they have no resources to handle life. Let them see death, let them see despair, let them see age, let them see wrinkles. Because one day these things are going to happen to all of us. How can you protect people from those kinds of things? That's what it's all about. And you know, you can't tell me there isn't a greater power. We came into the Spastic Children's Foundation, all my class went off in different directions, except this girl who was frightened to leave my bedside or my side. And she went, a little girl came in on a wheelchair, a quadriplegic, drooling all over herself. And she looked at this lovely girl, all dressed up beautifully in the latest outfit. And she said, "You're so beautiful. Will you feed me?" You know, and this girl looked at me in horror. She said, "I don't know how." I said, "You don't know how to feed someone and you're 21 years old? Here's the mouth, here's the fork, here's the food, you put it in here." You know, the last paragraph, or the last few words in her term paper at the end of the semester, and I'll never forget it, said, "I woke up one day when I fed a little girl who needed me." It has an interesting story. She's working with handicapped children. You know, I also heard of a woman who was the bane of everyone's existence in this retirement home. the man who runs it, who was a friend of mine, was going out of his mind. She complained about everything. She hated the place. She hated the other people in it. She hated the food. She hated the nurses. She hated the attendants. She hated the air. She was complaining about everything, and he was just about ready to go mad. You know, what am I going to do with this woman? When he had a flash of genius. He put her in charge of mental health. Isn't that wonderful? And then he sat her down and he said, honey, you are responsible for making all the people in this home happy. It worked. And she's the happiest one of all now. A very dear friend of mine who worked all of her life in the restaurant business with her husband. Night and day, you know, that's a forever kind of a job. It never ends. And finally, when they really made it and they started to spread out, have another restaurant, things became comfortable. You know, she loyally was working at all of them and doing her job, and he began to look elsewhere for something more young. You know, if you look for something more young and you have lots of moolah, you'll find them. And he found her, and he left this beautiful lady after something like 20 years of marriage and struggle and family. And of course she was wiped out. She was beside herself. She thought her life had ended and so on. And luckily somebody told her about hospice. And she went and volunteered in hospice, and she learned how to let go. She learned how to say goodbye. And she finally let this man go, and she said, if he wants to go off, let him go. You know, just recently, it's beginning to have a very happy ending. She met a doctor at hospice. They're having a great time. The young girl, in the meantime, has gone to greener fields. And she was able to say, and with really intense feeling, I feel so sorry for him. He really needed me, you know, and he didn't know it. Brian Wolfe, the wonderful psychiatrist, said, to find happiness, we must seek it in a focus outside of ourselves. If you live only for yourself, you're always in immediate danger of being bored to death with the constant repetition of your own views and your own interests. It matters little for psychological purposes whether you interest yourself in making your town cleaner, or enlist in a campaign to rid your city of illicit drugs, or whether you help out with the hungry. Choose a movement which presents a distinct trend toward greater human happiness and align yourself with it. No one has learned the meaning of living until he has surrendered his ego to the services of his fellow man. And yet, you know, it amazes me. I get the literature in the field, the studies across my desk every single day, and everyone is still looking at all of the negative aspects of human behavior. Anxiety, fear, guilt, self-motivated ideas. And very few people look at the softer side of behavior and study the softer side. But we do know some things about giving. For one thing, we know that when you give, you are rewarded. The giver always gets the most in giving. Someone once asked me if I thought giving was ever unselfish. And you know, I couldn't say that, because of course it's unselfish. You don't go in with determined you're going to get something. None of these people I mentioned went in determined to get something, but you get it in spite of yourself. No money in the world can buy your being at a bedside of a dying person and holding their hands because there's nobody else to be there. And we're also learning that it isn't true that children are naturally selfish and ego-centered. That's a fallacy. If they live in a household where there is a lot of pro-social behavior, they learn that very, very early. You know, I recognized that early in my life because Mama and Papa were givers. They never had anything, but they always gave half of it. It was amazing. You know, my image of Papa is so interesting because, you know, Papa always used to grow a garden. I guess it's something the Italians do all the time. They're growing gardens. And he used to have in the summertime so much stuff, especially I remember zucchini. Good grief, you plant one little seed and you get 5 million zucchini. You know, and in my home, no one ever threw away anything. You ate everything. And so poor Mama, you know, there was zucchini cake and zucchini pie, zucchini pasta, zucchini primavera, you know, zucchini whatever. You know, we all began to look like little zucchini by the end of summer. She knew every recipe. There's a zucchini soup. There's a zucchini, you know, you can go on forever. You can do anything with zucchini. You can stuff them. Well, I don't mean that. But anyway, I remember that Papa used to go out and gather up all these tender, wonderful zucchini, and he used to go around the neighborhood. I would watch him, you know. He'd knock on the door, and the woman would come to the door, and he'd say, I got fresh zucchini for you, you know, free. And he'd come in, she'd let him in, and he'd disappear for a long time. Then he'd come out and go to the next door with some more zucchini. And all the neighborhood kids would get me, and they'd say, if your dad doesn't stop bringing those yucky green things to our house, we're gonna kill you. You know, I say, Papa, please don't give away the zucchini. What's the matter? Everybody likes zucchini. No, not everybody. Well, then they're crazy because I'm going to keep giving them. But I always remember him giving. You know, one of the most amazing things, when he was literally dying in the hospital and he still had to nurture, the nurses would go crazy looking for him, and he was always out in the back watering the flowers, trimming them, cutting. The gardener doesn't know how to take care of these flowers, you know. No wonder he lived such a wonderful, rich life for so many years. And Mama, you know, Mama was never happy until there were zillions of people around the dinner table. Everyone that came, come on in and eat. You know, there was always this marvelous minestrone soup on the stove all the time. It became a personal friend. You'd walk in the room and you could smell the odor of minestrone soup, simmering, simmering. You know, everything that was left over went into the minestrone soup. And you could always tell when we were really poor because it got really watery. And when we were doing well, it was big and heavy and good. You know, the pasta went in. It's wonderful. I don't know why we don't do that anymore. You'd come home late, you know, Papa would come home late from the restaurant and Mama would serve him the minestrone soup and they would eat and talk. You'd come home crying because somebody beat you up because you were a dago. And Mama would sit you down with the minestrone soup. It worked. But when children see that kind of behavior, I remember I used to give away things all the time, and I still know people that you don't dare say, I like that, because they give it to you, and they get their greatest joy out of giving it away. It's interesting to study that kind of behavior as opposed to people that hoard. They want to keep it, you know, watch it. But there's so many obstacles, it seems, to giving. I still hear people say, I don't know how. You don't know how to give? For goodness sakes. It's so easy. Smile at someone, that's giving. Reach out and touch somebody, that's giving. Compliment somebody, that's giving. You're so pretty. You look like such a tender person. You're a joy to know. Guaranteed, tongue does not fall out. If it does, I will pay all doctor expenses. It's funny how little these things are and how important they are. They could conceivably save your life. I'm not the aggressive type. Other people can do those things. I can't do that. Well, you know, there is so much to be done by people who are soft and quiet also. You don't have to get on a soapbox. There is a wonderful woman that I know in Honolulu, And she had an aging mother who finally died, and she felt she was so lucky to have her in her environment until the point of death. But then she realized that her mother had outlived all of her friends and all of her relatives except for Dorothy. And she wondered about other people that weren't lucky enough to have at least a daughter left or a son left in the area and would be spending birthdays alone, Easter, Christmas, by themselves in a little apartment house by themselves. There's something wrong with a culture where that can exist. And Dorothy, in her little quiet way, went around and found out where these people were. She writes them cards, happy birthday. She gathers them up and brings them to her home for barbecue. Invite 5 of your favorite friends, and I'm going to cook for you all. I don't really have the time. That's another marvelous excuse. You know, it constantly amazes me when I read that people in the United States, at least, 6 hours a day is spent watching television. And you know, when I say that every place, people gasp. 6 hours a day? How can people watch television 6 hours a day? You know, think about it. People come home, they have dinner, they go in front of the television until 7 to 11. That's 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 4 hours there. In the morning, they get up and they turn it on and they watch, you know, Hello, New York. 2 hours there. There you have it. And I'm just thinking that if one night a week were a night that was dark in the house, you know, can you think, what did we do before television? You know what we did? We talked. We entertained ourselves. We played games. Can you imagine playing games with your family? Now we let the people in the television set have all the fun. And we sit there and watch them have fun. If everybody gave up 6 hours of their lives one night to do something for somebody else, it would be an incredible thing. And another excuse that we have is we forget about our own suffering. I beg of you, don't ever forget your own suffering. Many people in this audience, and you know it and I know it, have known poverty, have known loneliness, have known despair. Don't forget it, remember it. Don't dwell on it, but don't forget it. Because then when you see it, it rekindles in you something. And you need that. You know, when I was very little, everybody worked in our household. We had to survive. And this will date me, but I don't care because it's wonderful. I sold Liberty Magazine from door to door. Remember, I'll bet most of you don't even know what Liberty Magazine was. Liberty Magazine and Saturday Evening Post. And they gave me a little bag I used to wear around my neck and all my magazines in there. And you had to sell your quota by the end of the week or they took your bag away. Can you imagine? And I was never a salesman. I've never been a salesman. And I remember that I'd approach every house praying, oh dear God, don't let them be home. Wouldn't you love a salesman that went around with that attitude? And then they were home, you know. But I never forgot the responses of those people. People who would open the door, and there was this skinny little Felice in the door with his big eyes, sunken face, looking like he hadn't eaten in 10 years, and they'd say, get out of here! You're bothering us! You know, I have my little spiel ready. There's a nice article on Greta Garbo. You know. Did you hear me? And hurt. I'll never, ever yell at a little kid. Never under any circumstances. It's frightening to think about. But I also remember the wonderful things, like the woman who used to have me come every Tuesday, and I'd ring the doorbell, and she'd have me come in, and she'd buy a Liberty magazine, and she'd always comment, oh, good, there's an article on Greta Garbo. And then she'd say, sit down, and she'd give me Toll House cookies and milk. You need fattening up. And never will I forget the woman who had me come in on a rainy day because I hadn't met my quota and I had to get out there and they'd take my bag away. And she bought all of my magazines. She dried me off and she said, now get home and get into dry clothes and go to bed. I don't ever want to forget those people, ever. I was just in Baltimore. I haven't told this anywhere because it just happened day before yesterday. And there was a big baseball group staying in the hotel in which I was staying. And of course, all the little kids from the neighborhood were there with their little baseball cards, ready to get the signatures of their heroes and their models. And we were coming down the elevator, and I was there with one of the players. And when the door opened, this little kid came out, and he was so cute. He was about 9 years old. You remember their heroes? And he walked up to this man, and he said, oh, please, could I have your autograph? And this guy said, buzz off, kid. Buzz off. You know, all at once, all this stuff fell around me, and I remembered the people that said buzz off to me, and I thought, you know, you're a tiny human being. You may be making $1 million a year, but you're a tiny, tiny, tiny human being. And I kept trying to think about that little kid and how that hurt him and maybe disillusioned him forever. And then also another thing that inhibits our giving is our lack of understanding about what it means to help. You don't have to have special skills. You just have to feel what's inside of you as a living, breathing human being. You know, none of us know how to handle death. Death always comes as such a surprise and comes to everybody. And recently, one of my very, very best friends of 30 years died. And cancer just ate him up before my eyes. And I used to go to the hospital every single moment that I could, just to say hello. There was nothing I could do. He was doomed. And it was very awkward. What do you say to somebody like that, you know? How are you feeling, Les? Oh, you look good today. You know, I don't know about you, but I can't play those games. And I remember that the most exciting and wonderful moment for me of realization and depth of understanding came once when I was standing there and they had finally put him in one of those oxygen tents, mainly to keep the germs from reaching him. And he looked at me and he had just withered away. And I didn't know what to say to him, but I wanted to touch him. And I put my hand up against this plastic bag. And he very, very weakly put his hand against it. And for a moment, we exchanged the warmth of our hands. That was the most quality visit I spent. And what did it take me? What energy did that take me? I recently was on an airplane, and as I walked on, there was a stewardess who saw me, and she said, oh, Dr. Buscaglia, I've always wanted to meet you. Oh, I'd love to talk with you. Could I talk with you later on after we do our service? And I said, oh, of course. And she came to me after, and she sat down, and honestly, this young lady had so many problems. It came out like an avalanche. You know, her husband was fooling around and her child was disturbed and you know, she had no one to turn to and she was feeling frantic. I said not one single word as the stuff came out and out and out. And really about 25 minutes into this, she stopped for a minute and she dried her tears and she took a long, deep sigh. And she said, oh, you've helped me so much. You know, most people just need a kind ear if you don't know what else to give. An occasional smile, interest in them. That's all it takes. In the past 20 years, I thought about this a few months ago and it just astounded me. All of us in this audience have been through so many things, i.e., and we're still going through, the drug culture, the generation gap, the trauma of Watergate, the sexual revolution, the gender revolution, the energy crisis, the greening of America, future shock, the me decade, the you decade, the us decade. It's a wonder we haven't all gone mad. Megatrends, cohabitation, the yippies, the yuppies, the jogging craze, the workout craze. Imagine, we've all lived through, we still are, the jazzercise craze, the control culture. Oh, there's a new thing starting now. We're going to learn how to control each other. Boy, is that going to be fun. And then the 1 minute craze, you know, the 1 minute manager, the 1 minute doctor, the 1 minute mother, the 1 minute lover. And now there are a bunch of books coming out because I've been sent advanced copies that are the 30-second one, the 30-second manager, the 30-second lover. Whoops, and it's over. So I think, you know, having survived all of those things, it seems that maybe we should start looking for something else, and maybe this is the time to give love a chance, and to get away from egocentric competitiveness to sharing and interdependence. You know, Mike Farrell, the wonderful man from MASH, who is such a beautiful human being, on and off screen, delivered a little talk in Los Angeles several years ago, and I want to quote just a couple of lines from that because it's so perfect in context. He says, "I've come to realize lately that if you look deeper into life, you will find a secret after all. It's a secret that's maintained by a conspiracy of sorts, a conspiracy of silence. It's a secret that we keep from ourselves as well as each other. And the secret is so simple. It's simply, I love you." It's based on the premise that we're all lovable. And I'm afraid that we're not allowing ourselves to be in our society. We're so busy competing and coping and dealing and negating and punishing and competing and stopping that we've confused our values and our priorities. Maybe it's time that we stop and sort them out again. Each of us has to discover his or her own value. The answer to all these monumental problems of our society and the world is very simple, I'm sure. It is simply, I love you. All people really want, you know, is a little love, a little attention, and a little respect. That's true. That's all we ask for. And why is it so hard to give it? A little love, a little attention, and a little respect. The solutions of our problems will flow from that understanding. There are, it seems to me, two choices, two forces at large in the universe. They are love and fear. Fear is the stopping force, the negating, the restricting, the condemning, the no in our society. Love is responsible for all of the nurturing and all of the positiveness in existence. It's always the yes. It's then up to us to make the choice and explode the secret at last, and to finally get the courage to say to each other, I love you. I love that. And I think there's a way in which we can all start doing it. And I'd like to suggest maybe how. Maybe each day of your life you should do something to make somebody else happy. Never go to bed at night without being able in a tangible way to say, what have I done to make somebody else happier, more beautiful, more secure? You know, I think my life did a flip-flop on the day that I realized I was no longer going to define a great day in my life and a perfect day in my life as a day when everything went my way, but rather as a day where, through some power of mine, I was able to make your day a little bit better. And it made all the difference. And secondly, each day of your life, do something to make yourself happy. You know, sometimes we forget that we also need, and we have a right to happiness also. You know, stop in front of the mirror for a minute and say, what can I do for you, you sweet old thing? And the mirror will answer, buy that new outfit you've always wanted. And you say to the mirror, you're so right. It's just what I need, and go out and buy it. Why are we so often involved in doing and doing and doing for others and never doing anything for us? And you know you deserve it. You're a good person. And each day of your life, do something you'd rather not do. But you know you have to sooner or later, because after you do it, you feel so good. You know, go ahead and clean out the cupboard. And when the cupboard is clean, you have one less thing that bugs you. Because, you know, you're constantly saying, gee, I really have to get around to that cupboard. And that eats away at you. You know, I'm gonna wash that car. Well, get out and watch it, and then it's done. Oh, is it fantastic what it does for you when you do that? Write that letter, make that phone call. It's helping you. And then each day of your life, do something to challenge your mind. Because remember that we know this, it is an anatomical, physiological reality that what you don't use will fall into disuse. That means if you don't start using your mind, it's going to be worthless to you. You'll forget how to think anymore. Many of you know that one of the big passwords in our home was Papa was always saying, Felice, what did you learn today? And I still learn it. Learn something new. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be world-shaking. You don't have to understand the theory of relativity. Find out what the population of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is. And then tell somebody. Gertrude, did you know that the population of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is 2,863? Gertrude said, have you gone crazy? Who cares about the population of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? The people in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho do. It's a wonderful thing. You never know when that's going to be necessary. You have to conjure it up. And then each day when you find you're having a negative thought, shut up! We are so ready to talk about negativity. We're always ready to discuss the things that went wrong. But when you have a positive thought, will you state it? That would be wonderful. When you see something well done, will you run up and tell them? When somebody does something beautiful, will you reinforce it by saying to them, that was beautiful? Will you take a minute and say, honey, that was a great meal? You're an incredible cook. And even if she says, oh, that's crazy, you know, what's the matter with you tonight? Say it anyway. And each day of your life, find something that you're thankful for and verbalize it. You know, when I was in the second grade, I had one of those teachers that all the kids used to laugh at and say she was really ready for the loony bin. She used to have us stand up in front of the class every morning after we saluted the flag and tell the class some one thing that you are grateful for. And she'd always start it, you know. We knew what she wanted us to say. So we'd stand up and say, I'm grateful for my eyes. Oh, and the kids in the class would crack up. Get Biscotti, he's thankful for his eyes. I'm thankful for my nose. Everyone would die laughing. She'd say, oh, that's so wonderful. Did you know that you couldn't taste without your nose? Good for you, Mary. I'm glad you're grateful for your nose. You know, I'm grateful for my ear. You know, all at once, now that I'm getting up in age, I realize what the woman was doing. I'm very grateful for my residual hearing. I'm grateful for what I can see, even if it means I have to hold my card out here. I'm grateful for whatever memory I have left after walking into a room determined, and I get to the middle of the room and I'm wondering, what the hell am I here for? What did I come here for? Then I go back and retrace my tracks. No words, forgotten, finished. 2 years later, I'm walking through the room. Oh, I remember what it was. Now I'm grateful. You know, there is a wonderful thing that I just learned in the business world, and we have a lot to learn from each other. And I wish that the social scientists would begin to recognize this. The business world does. And that's something called the rule of 250. And it says that every one of us has a constellation of 250 people with whom we interact within a week or 2 weeks of our lives, come into contact with, and usually share the positive and the negative of what we've experienced in the past weeks. 250 people we can affect. And then think of the ripple effect. If I had you and I shared with you 250 people beside you, and you went out and affected 250, and then he affected 250, my goodness, that's vast. So if somebody likes a product, they'll probably tell in a month's time 250 people about that product. You know, or if it killed you, you'll probably tell 250 people. Watch out for that stuff. And I'm convinced that it would be true about giving your love away. If you gave it away to 250 people, and then asked them to give it away to 250 people, the power that you would have. And you know, I realize that you have a lot of power, but it's been a long time that you've been sitting on your hoopy doopies. And I want to close, but I want to close with something that may shock some people, but you know, when someone gives a lecture, you usually close with a quote from Shakespeare, or at least Cicero, and if not Cicero, Dante, and then when you leave, everyone's very impressed. Well, this is going to really shock my colleagues because it's neither scholarly nor sophisticated. I'm going to quote from Ann Landers. And you know, I really get a big kick out of Ann Landers because there's a lot of good homespun wisdom in her. And not only that, but she tells it where it's at least the way she sees it. She's one of the few people that says, honey, you're a jerk. But I like this. It's a really positive statement. It says this: if you have love in your life, it can make up for a great many things that you lack. And if you don't have it, no matter how much else you have, it's never enough. So, if you can pass your love on to 250, each of you, I promise to reach my 250. And I'm convinced that together we can change the world. Thank you very much.